Toys R Us collapses again. TikTok shop has turned into a discount bin and Aussie wine is getting ripped out by the roots. But don't worry, Lego and Nike are here to save us all. Welcome back, everyone. I am Mal Chia here for episode 91 of This Week in E-Commerce. Before we get into it, a quick heads up that this will be the last solo episode I'm going to be doing, hopefully for the foreseeable future, because we're going to be shaking things up from next episode. I will have a new co-host joining me on a permanent basis, someone who has been on the show before, a very regular and popular guest who is sharp, savage, and is here to really keep me honest and on my toes. So I'm super excited. Tune back in next week to find out who that is. But I promise that the show will be much punchier, much faster, and will probably involve a hell of a lot more swearing. But this week, we're going to be talking about a lot of contrast in the industry right now, particularly about some brands who are doing a little bit tougher, some industries which are really feeling the pressure, one of my favorite industries, I should say, but also some local players who are really punching above their weight right now. So I'm super excited for that. So let's dive into it. Our first story of the week is about Toys R Us. Now, Toys R Us, you probably haven't set foot in one for a long time. I know with my two older kids, when they were young, we used to go to Toys R Us all the time. But with my younger kids, who are 6 and 3, I don't think I've set foot in many toy stores with them at all, except for maybe a Target or a Kmart potentially, so not a dedicated toy store. They have entered administration for the third time globally and the second time locally. Toys R Us locally relaunched as Hobby Warehouse Group in 2019 after going to administration, and they have now called in the administrators again, citing unsustainable losses, cost pressures, and a failure to scale effectively. Now, for the most part, when they went into administration in 2019, they reinvented themselves as an online-only store. Matter of fact, I can't actually remember if there were any more bricks and mortars, so I believe it was all online. But even then, they struggled to really have any point of differentiation. So what went wrong for Toys R Us? Number one is that the toy market is incredibly competitive. Not only do you have a product which is fairly low frequency, but it's also low loyalty as well. It's really hard to have a point of differentiation in this space. Matter of fact, you would have to say that Toys R Us stores were probably the point of differentiation. They were something which an Amazon couldn't have, because you were able to go in there, you were able to play, interact with various toys. You know, I remember many hours when I was a much younger person at the Toys R Us store in Rundle Mall in South Australia, playing there with my teenage friends, mucking around on different bits and pieces. But those days are long gone, and you now have this place which doesn't really have a whole lot. It is just an online store. So you not only have a category which is very low frequency, but it's also low loyalty. People will shop wherever they want, wherever you can find the cheapest price for that particular product. And the purchasing behavior tends to be more seasonal. You don't go out and buy a toy for your child every week, particularly in this economic climate. It's not like skincare or snacks, which is generally a consumable. But also that return rates are extremely high as well in this space. Parents return a lot, and kids also change their minds really, really fast because tastes change. The TV shows they're watching change. Bluey episodes will release new things in there which people will want, and the taste will change with that. So you're turning over your product very, very frequently as well, and you're also getting a higher rate of return. So it's much more difficult to maintain a profitable, sustainable business. But also, while parents like myself remember Toys R Us fondly and the good times which we may have had in the store, kids don't care. Kids don't really care where they get the toy from as long as they get the toy. Hence why most toys now are being sold through those general department stores like a Target or a Kmart or just on Amazon, because that's just the easiest place to get it. Most of the retailers, most of the brands you're buying from, like Lego, have their own Amazon store. So they are selling that product at the RRP and it will arrive to you the next day. Which also means that going into a toy store where there's a lot of pester power from the kids, you no longer have. You can avoid that altogether. One of the most painful things to do with children is to actually take them to a toy store, because you go into the toy store, next thing you know, you're being dragged in every which direction. They can't decide what they want. You're going back and forth on different things, and you end up spending way more than what you'd intended to. But if you just buy online from Amazon, you avoid that altogether. But if you happen to be walking by and you're going through anyway for a lot of other purchases, you can sort of bear that. You can sort of wear the fact that you're going to be pulled in a lot of different directions. But in this case, the Toys R Us comeback is failed. And let's face it, I don't think that they're likely to come back from this. And I think that they are going to be another retail zombie headline. If they come back, and it will be in a much more diminished form, potentially, as another brand which Kogan may buy, like Dick Smith, and will continue to operate, this time for toys, as they continue to expand their marketplace empire, which is what they're seeing as being the future of that business. Which then brings us to TikTok Shop. Now, we have been talking about TikTok Shop for a long, long time now, for well over a year. We've been talking about when it's going to be rolled out into Australia. We expect it to be earlier this year. That's not the case. I am aware of a couple of brands who are currently trialing it at the moment, but they're far away from it becoming prime time and mainstream. And it looks like there's a reason why, because Retail Dive, which is a great publication in America, very US-centric, released their report into TikTok Shop and what the numbers are currently showing. And the numbers are not painting a particularly rosy picture for brands or for consumers, for that matter. Because at the end of the day, when you look at TikTok Shop as a sales channel, the numbers are extremely low. Matter of fact, annual spend is well under $100. 95% of users of TikTok Shop have spent under $50 USD on that platform. Only 5% have spent over $500. So you can see that there's a huge disparity there in terms of how people are using the platform and its ability to really move product for a lot of different brands at any level of scale, because people just still aren't really using it. But it actually gets worse from there, because they're not using it to buy traditional products like apparel or beauty for the most part. They're using it to buy more content-fueled deal hunting, which really taps into that whole dopamine-driven consumption instinct and impulse buying of you see something and you want it right then and there because it's trendy, it's catchy, and the price is really good. Because what we can see of what works on TikTok Shop is that it's more like the impulse beauty novelty purchases, which really are getting a lot of attention. So things like viral mascara or peach fuzz razors or mini kitchen gadgets, which really get your attention, such as portable sous vide kits. Things which have a really strong visual hook and are really satisfying to watch to the end and make you think, wow, I need that thing in my life. So, because the price is under $20, you just go and buy it without really thinking too much of it, which doesn't really apply to a lot of brands. And I can't actually recommend that with my hand on heart, because at that level of AOV, you need to have the best margins in the world to make that purchase work. Because by the time you factor in your pick pack, your fulfillment, and everything else which goes into it, let alone your gross margin, there's not much room left. So unless you have a product which has really, really high margins and it taps into that impulse novelty type purchase, which people are likely to jump on, I wouldn't be testing this at all. If you are a premium brand in fashion or wellness or footwear or anything like that, this is not the place for you. This is not where you can build brand story. Still focus on creating your TikTok content and you running your TikTok ads. But TikTok Shop is not the place where you should be selling your products. You should be focusing on UGC, influencers, and creators to really continue to grow awareness and tell the story about your brand, rather than focusing on trying to sell it in them. So focusing on using TikTok as a place where you can demonstrate your brand and the product, rather than trying to immediately sell where it doesn't really work too much. Speaking of industries which are also in a bit of trouble right now and not really working too much, is one which is very close to my heart as a South Australian, but also a huge enophile. And I repeat that, enophile, that's OENOPHILE, which means I'm a wine lover, is that the wine industry is going through a massive contraction right now, particularly when it comes to red wine. because the Bortley, which is one of the oldest vineyards here in South Australia, have announced that they are going to be ripping up some of their heritage vineyards of red wine, of their red wine grapes, because there is just a huge glut of red wine at the moment. And it's so bad that growers, not just them, but all around the country, are starting to bulldoze their Shiraz, Cabernet Sauvignon, and other red wine grapes, which is what Australia has historically been known for, in place of white wine grapes. Now, this is for a number of reasons, but it appears that part of it is due to the fact that there is still the hangover from the China tariffs, which have only just been eased, and we're still yet to see export volume reach the same levels they were prior to the tariffs being announced, and China was the number one export market for wine, but also changing consumer habits as well, particularly teetotalism, which, if anyone has been listening for a while, I certainly am not, but it's something which is definitely on the rise, especially amongst younger, health-conscious consumers who appear to be rejecting alcohol in general and swapping it out for things like seltzers, adaptogens, kombucha, and other non-alcoholic options like that, or at least lower alcohol. Now, that's not to say that all alcohol and all wine consumption is down, because consumption of some varietals, such as Prosecco and other white wines like Pinot Gris, I believe, are actually increasing. It's mainly the red wine varieties which people are now avoiding for various reasons. And that to me is a real shame, because alcohol is a huge contributor to the Australian economy. Not only is it a $50+ billion industry, it also contributes over $6.5 billion in taxes, which is a huge amount, and a huge amount which can't be easily replaced, because the government does rely on taxes on alcohol for revenue. So that's all going to be going away. And also, when you think that the impact isn't just on government coffers, it's also on the hospitality industry as well. In most restaurants, cafes, they operate on very, very low margins when it comes to food. Matter of fact, on food alone, if you're operating at a solid double-digit percentage, you're doing pretty well. In other words, they're operating on very, very fine margins when it comes to their food alone. Because where most restaurants make their money is in the wine, is in the alcohol sales, which will typically attract a 70 to 80% margin, and where they make that money back. So if you imagine our drinking contracts, and I'm not advocating that, we all become raging alcoholics, just healthy, functional ones, you're going to see a lot of restaurants go out of business because they simply cannot sustain themselves on food alone. They rely on alcohol sales and wine sales to be able to make any sort of margin, to have any sort of profit. So keep that in mind as we start to see these shifts through the market of what the potential could be for that. In the same way that when you think about sports betting and how sports betting advertising was a hot button topic leading into the election, but which every party decided to just shelve for now, the danger of banning sports betting advertising is that that is the number one industry currently advertising on most TV, whether it be linear, broadcast TV, or connected TV. It is the number one advertiser. So when you take that away now, there's going to be a big hole in those revenues, which means that our ability to produce more content, local content, goes down, but also the ability to sustain a whole lot of jobs. A lot of people will lose their jobs out of this. So there's a lot of impacts in terms of how our world is put together, in terms of how every single industry is interconnected and how they relate so strongly to each other, where if you pull the plug on one, you may see others go. And this is something which you can think about with AI as well and what the impacts are, but I'm not going to go into that one just yet. Because while the wine industry is suffering at the moment, the chocolate industry, in particular, South Australian chocolate manufacturer Robern Menz, are actually seeing their fortunes improve quite dramatically. And this is despite the fact that cocoa prices globally are up roughly about 70%, largely driven through the droughts in West Africa, affecting the ability to produce cocoa. And you would see that in a lot of the big chocolate manufacturers, when you go into your supermarkets or anywhere else really, you're either seeing one of two things. You're either seeing prices go up or you're seeing shrinkflation. So same price for less product, because these companies are generally starting to really sweat their margins because they are unable to make the margin because their primary input into their products is going up so dramatically. So how is this so different for Robern Menz? Well, for Robern Menz, they have actually been diversifying away from strictly chocolate manufacturing. Now, Robern Menz is one of the oldest chocolate manufacturers and confectionery manufacturers here in Australia. They're a proudly South Australian company. Happy to say that I've had an opportunity to work with them before, and they are just a fantastic and lovely bunch of people. Now, they are famous for making fruit chocks, which is a South Australian delicacy, I should say, but also recently have taken on the licenses for manufacturing violet crumble and polly waffle, which are obviously two very, very well-known Australian iconic treats. But what they've done is that they have lent into licensing to expand the brand, not just locally, but also into the US as well. Now, licensing, like we've talked about many, many times over the past couple of years, is big business, and it's becoming more and more prevalent. And they are taking the IP which they own, like Violet Crumble and Polly Waffle, and are leveraging the nostalgia factor with those products to expand into other categories as well. And they're targeting overseas markets and plugging into distributors who are already embedded into those ecosystems in order to not just to spread the product, but also to find different verticals to expand the cultural relevance of the product. And that's fundamentally what licensing is all about. It's all about building cultural capital. And Robern Menz has been actively seeking new licensing partners across global household brands to fast track the distribution and increase that cultural capital at scale. Some of the brands they've been partnering with are Melbourne-based Collagen Co., who have their glow shakes, the collagen protein shakes, which are really quite delicious, actually. And that was a really lovely flavor. But also working with global brands such as Subway, Guinness, PlayStation, and McCain's to extend the product into new and interesting categories as well. And apparel. Seeing apparel for some of these brands really pop off because people want to wear their passions on their sleeves now. If you love a brand and you love it so much, you're more willing to want to wear it on your body because it says something about you. And you can see this is what Men's are tapping into right now, because they also have partnerships coming up with Body Science, Karma's Muesli Bars, and Bulla Ice Cream, as well as Violet Crumble Choc Tops, which are only available at Hoyt cinemas around Australia. So finding new ways to expand their reach, to expand their relevance, and to increase their cultural capital. Because when you do this, you are tapping into that built-in audience who may have an emotional attachment already in a very latent, inactive form, but which you can activate. But also means that you can cut through a lot of the noise on the shelf space because you have a known IP. And that's the beauty about licensing. The licensing isn't just about generating revenue, and it's great at doing that. It's about being a growth engine. It's about arbitraging on the attention of your partner brand and your brand as well. And you can see this done more recently as well with what Elite 11 did with their AFL collaboration, which sold out, I believe, in a matter of minutes. But also what Nike are now seeking to do as well with their recent announcement of their multi-year partnership with Lego. And this one came out last week, and I got to say, I was such a big fan of this because Nike, who have been doing it tough, and I use the word inverted commas tough because they are still the number one sportswear brand in the world, are looking to regain some of that cultural capital. And they've been doing this recently through the partnership with Skims, like we talked about a few months ago, but also now partnering with Lego as well to bring their brands to life in a different form. And they're going to be doing this first with the Nike Dunk collaboration, which came out last week, but also soon to be Air Max and Metcons as well. So not just tapping into the products, but really tapping into the whole cultural capital and cultural engineering and cultural cachet, which partnering with Lego does. Because that essentially is what Lego does now. Lego has become the hot brand, which if you partner with them, you instantly have cultural capital. Any Hollywood blockbuster worth its salt will have a Lego set or multiple Lego sets. And they'll come out year after year after year. And they're a way to keep your property, your IP alive. Matter of fact, the number one selling Lego set right now is the Formula One set, which is going absolutely gangbusters. And my son has the Oscar Piastri one because he was begging for it when that came out. And when you look at this, when you partner with Lego, you have this amazing way to create cross-generational awareness and desire for your brand as well. with parents who are buying for their kids, adults who are buying for themselves, hype beasts, trendsetters who are telling you to buy the next drop. Because this isn't just about margins, it's about meaning and stacking meaning onto your product to help you play outside your category and build a cultural symbol, not just creating products. Because if your next brand collaboration doesn't make people feel anything, you shouldn't do it. But partnering with Lego does make you feel something. So while we wrap this up, we can see that the toy market is in a state of severe flux right now. Some of those pure play retailers are unable to survive as we transition to a new way of doing business. TikTok is also becoming a noisy place to shop from. The wine category is going through reinvention, and the chocolate industry is also going through a lot of change as well. But what's the through line through all this? It's about context. It's about category, and it's about culture. So next week, I'm super excited to be introducing my new co-host with the same format, the same clarity, a lot more banter, and we can't wait to shake things up. So in the meantime, keep innovating, keep growing, and keep selling, and we'll see you all next week.